A huge batch of never-seen-before Epstein files were released last night, which include the likes of Michael Jackson, Chris Tucker, Bill Clinton, again, Mick Jagger, and many more. But here's the three main key takeaways. Firstly, the pictures. Bill Clinton definitely got the worst of this one, with shots of him everywhere, including looking far too comfortable in a hot tub and a swimming pool. We got not Prince Andrew lying across the laps of several redacted women, Chris Tucker, which, let's be honest, no one wanted to see him here, Michael Jackson with Bill Clinton and Diana Ross. But yet again, from the pictures, nothing groundbreaking. It's not showing anything illegal. And there are huge redactions. The second key takeaway is that this release actually failed to follow the law requiring the release of all the files. In fact, for example, every single one of the 119 grand jury testimony pages were redacted. We're talking entire pages here. However, in saying that, the Department of Justice has said they will release more documents in the coming weeks. And the third and potentially biggest key takeaway from this is that we got confirmation last night that the FBI was warned about Epstein as far back as 1996. You see, one of the victims, Maria Farmer, submitted a complaint to law enforcement that Epstein stole pictures of her underage sisters and then sold them to potential buyers. In fact, one part of her handwritten complaint says that Epstein at one time requested redacted name to take pictures of young girls at swimming pools. Epstein is now threatening redacted name that if she tells anyone about the photos, he will burn her house down. So the FBI was tipped off about Epstein 23 years before he was finally brought to justice. And even saying justice is generous because he died before he was ever tried in court. But there is still a lot more to comb through and still to come, so I'll keep you guys updated.
Okay, I spent the last several hours today going through the Justice Department's release of the so-called Epstein files. I say so-called because this definitely is in no way, shape, or form a complete release of the Epstein files. That's not my opinion. The DOJ has already admitted to Congress that is the fact. According to Representative Ro Khanna, who is the co-sponsor of the discharge petition that forced the Trump DOJ to release these files today, the Epstein file as we know it is a total of 300 gigabytes, and what we got today was 2.5 gigabytes. You see what I'm saying? That's the definition of incomplete. And despite all of that, there are some troubling things that were released today. And before I talk about those some more, I need you to know that there is absolutely no context to any of these photos or documents I'm about to show you. I have no idea when some of these photos were taken, where they were taken, or why Epstein kept them, nor do we know what the DOJ was doing with them or why they were hidden in this file all these years. Okay, so let's look at a few of those photos. There are too many pages to count of stuff like this. Images of victims clearly whose faces are redacted, stages of undress, and even some in frames. There's this one of Epstein with a very little girl in a little ballet leotard and tights and little ballet shoes. And then there are countless pages like this of images of victims clearly, and everything is redacted. But there are pictures of famous people too. You can see here former President Bill Clinton in a jacuzzi with a female whose face is redacted. And then there's this one of him right there in the middle with Ghislaine Maxwell swimming with a female whose face is also redacted. But then there are other photos of him with females whose faces are redacted. Here's one, here's another, and another. There's a never-before-seen photo of Clinton with Jeffrey Epstein, and then there's a few with him and Kevin Spacey right up here as well. You can see in this photo, that's Ghislaine Maxwell right there. And then there's this one with Michael Jackson, Diana Ross, and a couple of people who appear to have their faces redacted. There are randomly a few photos of actor Chris Tucker. Here he is with Ghislaine Maxwell and a female whose face is redacted. And even the former Duchess of York, Fergie, with a female whose face is redacted. Fergie by some answers from Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General today. He sent a letter to Congress explaining what the DOJ's redaction process looked like. The Epstein Transparency Act specifically says that certain things can be redacted, like victims, identifying information about victims, information that could jeopardize ongoing investigations, or any kind of information that could jeopardize national security. And that's pretty much it. But Todd Blanche, who, by the way, is the same guy who went down to interview Ghislaine Maxwell, and then miraculously a few days later she was transferred to that low-security prison in Texas, well, he said that the DOJ took some liberties to redact a few other things, including law enforcement names and email addresses, and names of Justice Department officials, and things that could be considered attorney-client privilege. None of that, by the way, is allowed in the Epstein Transparency Act. So what's missing from today's drop? Well, it's hard to know when you don't know, but for sure, we're missing Jeffrey Epstein's autopsy. We're missing the 60-count federal indictment that the U.S. government threw out in 2007 and instead gave Epstein that sweet ordeal. And we're definitely missing the files that Epstein kept on his computer, which we believe include more flight logs, meetings, and names of other men who may have been involved. Now, I want to be clear here. The information released today from the Department of Justice does not comply with the Epstein Transparency Act. The law specifically says DOJ shall release these files in their entirety today. Not a fraction of them, not a portion of them, all of them. And that didn't happen. So now what? Well, according to Representative Khanna, he and other congressmen and women are considering holding Attorney General Pam Bondi and her deputies in contempt of Congress, or perhaps prosecuting them, or even perhaps impeaching them. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, they're not going to really do that. Plus, Trump's DOJ would have to be involved, and they're not going to prosecute their own. Well, that's probably true right now, but according to Representative Khanna, the statute of limitations on violating a law like this does not run out until way after Trump leaves office. So if it doesn't happen now, that doesn't mean it won't happen later.